This is Washington and Greene Streets in Greenwich Village in New York City, Manhattan. This is the site of the worst industrial accident in the history of the United States, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, where 149 women would die, 23 firefighters would die as well, as a cause of a fire which breaks out on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors, where immigrant workers were making what was called a shirtwaist. They were mostly Italian or Jewish immigrants who were working to be paid per piece, and a fire starts because there's no real safety standards at the time to prevent fire. And there was a lot of union activity going on around at that time. So the doors were locked to the shirtwaist factory, the Triangle factory. So that prevented unauthorized breaks and prevented people from stealing things, but also prevented union agitators, as they were called, from coming in and talking to the workers. Now it's part of NYU, but if you can imagine, you've got two choices. You can burn to death or you can jump. So I can imagine when the thought of being burned alive versus, 10 stories doesn't look that bad at that time. One woman actually jumped out of the 7th floor building and did survive. And the problem is the building met all of the city's fire standards for the time. There was even a hook and ladder, and the ladder came, and people were standing around here shouting up, up, up to the ladder to try to get to the women who were trapped inside, and they were out. It's not there anymore, but there was a ledge right up there, and you can see there's a little bit of ledge, but there was a much bigger ledge that went around the outside of the building. And then the ladder stopped. Couldn't get to the women. Some jumped for it and they died. And the streets here are hollow, and they were able to get there was colored glass you could see through into the underground. The women actually broke through that and hit into the ground. The bodies would eventually have to be taken to a morgue to be identified. And one of the witnesses to this fire, and I can't remember her name, would be FDR's Secretary for Labor. And she decided, as well as FDR decided, that this was it. You could no longer exploit workers this way. The issue with the Triangle Company was they moved to New Jersey and next week started the same operation. They weren't held liable for anything because they had already met all of the safety standards required. So, tragic. But things like this still go on. They go on in China, they go on in the third world. This was the worst disaster in the US, like I said, when it comes to labor. But things like this keep going on, At any rate, this is the birthplace of the New Deal in many respects. And every March 25th, the labor unions lay out flowers to all the people who lost their lives in this horrible fire. Another cheery one for everybody. Stay safe.